a distinguished panel and a great audience to talk about talent and developing leadership, subjects that are very near and dear to my heart and my colleagues' heart. I'm very excited that we have an addition to our panel who's not in our brochure there, and this is former Senator Bob Kerrey, a former Navy SEAL and Medal of Honor winner who was the governor of Nebraska and senator from Nebraska and then president of the New School, and who currently is executive chairman of the Minerva Institute for Research and Scholarship, an interesting educational organization you might want to say a few words about. So, it was wonderful having the lead-in from our lunch speaker about the importance of education and developing youth and so forth, some natural tie-in to what we want to talk about. And we're going to have a relatively short set of presentations here, and then have a little discussion among ourselves, and then open up for questions. So without further ado, I won't introduce all the rest of the panelists, but their bios, as I mentioned, are in the booklet. So Nina, a few thoughts from you on this topic?
Well, Rick and I talked about this, and I thought we would just sort of kick it off for all of us then to discuss it. But we're all here because people make things happen, right? People are at the essence of absolutely everything that turns this world. And whether or not you're in whatever the enterprise, if you're in education, if you're in business, if you're in the military, if you're in a not-for-profit, if you're in any kind of an enterprise, you need the right people with the right talent to make something happen. That's just at the core of everything. But of course, before you can figure out what kind of people you need, you have to know who and what you are and where you want to go. You need a strategy. And then you figure out what kind of people and what kind of talent you need to make that strategy become a reality and to keep the enterprise vital going forward. I think one of our most important assets in any enterprise is the people asset, and it requires significant investment. As the rector said during her speech today, we really have to make the emphasis on investment in people, the development of people to fit the strategic direction of the enterprise and to make sure they feel fulfilled and part of that. And then you need leadership that values that and can take the whole ensemble of talent and deliver against that strategic intention. So I think that would be about what I would want to say on this, because there are, of course, many things that strive from that. But that's a philosophy that I have, whether I'm sitting in a board meeting for a public company, at a university, at a healthcare organization, you name it. It's all about the people, who we've got, where we're going, and it does no good to say, oh, we're going to be, I'm going to make this simple now, #1 in Tutu Land, or whatever, or we're going to be the #1 maker of X. That's an irrelevant statement unless you have the right people that can make that happen.
Bob?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm kind of a pickup date here, so.
Hey, we're glad to have you.
As with all pickup dates, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Well, let me actually quote somebody from Nebraska that you probably know. When I was in the Senate, we'd do an annual conference with high school students, and the whole day was spent trying to answer a simple question, which was, can you become wealthy by accumulating a little bit over a long period of time? And the whole purpose of it was to teach basically the magic of compounding interest. And our keynote speaker every year was a guy who's done a pretty good job of that, Warren Buffett from Nebraska. And I don't know if you've ever been in his audience, he would not likely speak other than to the young men and women in the back. He likes to speak to young people more than to people like me. And he speaks just for a couple of minutes, and he's brilliant in question and answer, so he talks for a little bit. And there was a young man in the audience, I don't know how many of you from the West, but clearly he was a cowboy kid, maybe 16 or 17 years old. He was kind of squinting at you, and little bony ass, and kind of squared off against the question he asked was, Mr. Buffett, we've been studying how to become wealthy all day long, but sir, aren't most wealthy people jerks? To which Warren answered brilliantly that No, he says, that's not my experience. He said, my experience is that wealth just allows you to be a little more what you already were. So if you start off a jerk and you become wealthy, you can be a really big jerk and hire lawyers for $1,000 an hour and sue your family and friends and make everybody's life miserable. But if you recognize that as a young person, and to the young people in this audience, that you have three valuable things: intellect, energy, and character. And you got plenty of intellect and character, you wouldn't be in the room. And you don't control your intellect and character, your intellect and energy. They're apt to be birthrights, but your character is what you control. And you control it with decisions that you make every single day. Every single day. And the good news and the bad news is it's character that determines whether or not somebody wants to be your friend. It's character that determines whether or not somebody wants to follow you. It's character that determines whether or not somebody wants to become your husband or your wife, your business partner. It's what matters most of all. And it's underappreciated, I think, oftentimes in our testing environment, because we tend to test cognitive ability as opposed to whether or not somebody has the character to persist, the character to collaborate, the character to be honest, the character to give other people credit, as opposed to wanting to get all the credit in every single instance. So that would be my previously unsolicited opening statement. I'll be glad to answer whatever questions the moderator has.
You. So I'll go a little bit longer because I benefit from having heard Senator Kerry on Tuesday being interviewed by Bill Kelleher at the New York Times, and among his many thoughts about education, I think, and it's accurate to say that if I were analyzing it, the refrain that you delivered most frequently was, "Higher education isn't broken." Is that fair?
Yes.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the pathway from schools into the career community, and a little bit about that subject, and to reaffirm Bob's statement. And we're looking now at a unique moment in the trajectory of school to work. University isn't broken. I would maintain that K-12 to a good extent is, but I would also open by saying I'm very, very optimistic because of the changes, particularly over the last few years. All of the environment that we're in is I think, more than most of us accept, significantly influenced by the Great Recession. Students coming out of high school, aren't getting jobs and have less money in their families to go on into higher education. Their parents are less able to allow them to go to graduate school than they have been before. Very significantly, we have a cadre between 2007 and 2011 particularly, where the students didn't have the kinds of job opportunities coming out of the university that we all experienced. So in a sense, you have the pressure to really force change in K-12 education and to force change in the higher education sphere. And I think it's happening. And so what I'd like to talk about for a second is the good things that are happening on a trajectory to the work world. This doesn't address character, but it does address the things that are addressable by the system in terms of preparedness. In terms of preparedness, we're going into a world where digital is going to change the landscape and is changing the landscape. You may argue with aspects of this administration's educational policies, but some things are really kind of exciting. One is that the stimulus money was used to put computers into schools, and particularly one particular computer system. That's an interactive whiteboard. Most of you know what that is, but imagine a touch screen, an iPad the size of that wall, and the teacher can go up to it and access the web and use it as an interactive, real-time teaching tool. It is momentous. How many of those machines are out there? They're very expensive, and they're installed, and there's about 1.7 million in the school buildings in K-12 right now. So frankly, the teachers are learning to use this device, but I think it's going to help propel improvements in education going through K-12. Second thing that's happening is the Common Core. You are affected by it, or you're all hearing about it. And the Common Core is the result of a learned panel of people. I have no doubt that you may have been one of the governors that helped propel it. But in any case, what's come into being is a rigorous set of new standards, first in English language arts, and now in math, and following on in science. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be wrenching for the school system. But the students who come out of our schools in 2020 with this program are going to be very much better prepared. It's disciplined. It forces them to read complex text. It forces them to improve their critical thinking skills. And when we get to math and science, it's going to ensure that they have mastered basic concepts as they go up through the system. And what does that mean, really? It means that in this environment, we're going to take those tools, this investment, this vast investment in computers in the school system, and the improvements will partially come because the computer can do real-time assessment of where that child is. And in math, it's particularly vivid because most students exit K-12 and go into university, a majority, and never take another math course and never take another science course, at least not a serious one. They'll take physics for humanists, let's say. That's not a bad thing, but it's not hard science. And part of the reason that we self-navigate that direction is because there wasn't mastery at an earlier level in math that allows you to move up progressively toward calculus, as an example. What happens now is, in a friendly environment, the student is working on math problems. They have an issue. The computer sees that they missed this problem. They then deliver them half a step lower until they get it. When they get it, they move on to the next program. It's done in a friendly way. It's done in an interactive way. It's not a video game, but it uses gaming methodologies to make school more interesting and to bring more success into that school. When you do that, you've got a livelier classroom. Now, what's happening in higher education is, as you've all read, the movement of MOOCs, massive open online courses, and they're widely available. There's many thousands of courses, and there's many millions of people that are taking those courses. Is this working as a new way to deliver better education? You can get the courses that are taught at MIT, that are taught at Yale, that are taught at Stanford, and you can go online and it's for free anywhere in the world. What's happening? What's happening is less than 10% of people that start a MOOC course from Yale or MIT or another great institution are finishing the courses. So it's saying to the university system, there's something better. There's a hybrid that's still getting instruction and being among peers in a classroom and learning is an exciting environment. That's something that Bob's working on, and you may have comments on this as well. But we're going into an environment where we will be able to use digital education to enhance the experience at the university system. And then I'll go back to the impact of the Great Recession. The students and the parents are now insisting on outcomes that lead one more clearly into the job world. There's too many kids who were left behind during the Great Recession, and the process of that is that we're going to prepare students better for that world and enable them using interactive technology, I think, to have a stronger pathway into our world. I'll read you just a couple of things from a current survey. So this is from the Conference Board, and it's asking, what skills do we want? I'll just finish on these couple of data points. For high school graduates, employers, this is a large sample national survey, want professionalism, character, work ethic, character. Second, for high school students, they want an ability to do teamwork and collaborate. That is not in the old model of K-12, and it's becoming part of the model. Third, they want quality of oral communications. And then fourth, ethical standards. When we go to ask the employers of high school students, how would you rate in these areas? So let's start with English language ability. 70% of the students entering the workforce are rated as deficient. Mathematics, 53.5% rated as deficient. Basic geography, 45.7% rated as deficient. So you're talking about less than 10% as rated excellent in any of those categories. But to Bob's point, when we go to what do you want as an employer for a four-year college-educated students, number one is they want strong oral communications, 95%, teamwork and collaboration, 94%, professionalism, work ethic, 93%, written communications, 93%, critical thinking, problem solving, 92%, ethics, 92%, and leadership, 81%. However, for four-year college graduates, their ratings are pretty high. They rate as excellent language and oral skills, 26%, excellent in mathematics, 18%, and we go to geography only 5%. But deficiency is actually on a pretty low, is not a serious problem in the four-year college world. The upshot of all this is that the changes that are coming, I think, are going to enable us to see a better prepared workforce. The very fact that the government and an array of institutions are studying that pathway, I think, are leading us to a better instructional environment in both K-12 and in higher education. And I would end with a couple of remarks also from the conference board as to what business leaders should be doing to enhance this. One, partnership with the school system. Two, specifically work with high schools on post-secondary definition of critical skills for work. Three, provide hands-on learning experiences such as internships. I think it's terribly important, and we were talking about this in terms of fellowships a minute ago. It's terribly important that we all work very hard to find internships, practical ways that those students can enter at an early level into the work stream. And then finally, that the workplace itself has to become more learning friendly, that on-the-job education in an array of areas, not just for the job that you're doing, is a terribly important cultural change in our environment. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Rick.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to look at this I'm going to segue to the business leader perspective. So when I'm out consulting with my clients, both business and kind of learning and HR leaders, the talent and the people are one of the biggest concerns, one of the biggest issues, as Nina was mentioning. And on the mind of my clients are kind of three big areas: skills deficiencies, the engagement of the workforce, and then a future perspective around what are the changing demographics. I'm just going to talk about that with a little bit more examples. So we've talked a lot about the skills, and I would echo what was mentioned. The technical skills, so our clients, whether they be, I spend all of my time working in the financial services sector, both kind of here in New York and globally, and the constant theme that we're getting from our clients is don't have enough of a certain skill. Whether it be a very technical skill they're looking for, whether it be around policy and regulation, whether it be a broader skill, and kind of segueing off the character comment, a broader skill around collaboration, diagnosing a problem. And so there's a gap of both technical skills, and as you say, this is relevant to a number of different businesses and different industries, and also that breadth of skill, an individual to actually think through a problem that they've never really encountered before, and use some basics of how to diagnose a problem, how to collaborate, how to be resourceful, how to bring others into that conversation and co-create a solution. So big skills gaps. In terms of where these gaps exist, these exist at both an entry level, so the millennials, as well as experienced hires. So there's big challenges around the millennials, and this is globally entering the workforce. We at the firm here did a survey of our own millennials, the biggest survey that's ever been done. We surveyed 40,000 of our millennials because we really needed to understand what this generation was looking for. And some of our findings are consistent with what we're seeing with our clients. This is the generation that wants different things in terms of the real-time feedback and the coaching. And this is not a generation that's a single asset class. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Just because you happen to be a millennial, your experiences, what you're looking for is going to be different based off of education, country of origin, a number of where you are in your stage of life. And so a number of factors there. But what's interesting is our clients are consistently saying to us, the education system is failing us as business leaders. The first 2 years of entry into a workplace is like finishing school. People are not coming equipped with the right business skills, whether that be, so this generation's very savvy and resourceful. This generation has more knowledge than we did growing up. They're pretty analytical, but they lack some of the polish and some of the diplomacy and some of the collaboration that you need in business. You can have all the best technology in the world, but some of these basic skills that I do think go back to character are so important. So that's kind of the skills piece. The next piece is around engagement. There's within the US, and I'd say in a number of other economies, just look what's going on in the EU right now, there's a lot of disengaged workers out there right now. These are either people who are worried about being displaced or laid off. These are people who've had colleagues and friends who've been laid off. These are people who are left behind in the workforce who are now taking on 80% more of another job in that same company because they're resource constrained. One of the biggest toxic pieces in an organization is disengagement of a workforce. Bad things can happen, from terrible things that we've obviously seen earlier this week, but also loss in productivity. And it's a vicious spiral. So our business leaders are really perplexed about disengagement and how to re-engage people and re-engage them, and not by just throwing money at them, but re-engage them in terms of what is that learning experience you're looking for? What do you want to do in your career? Is there a lateral move that we can have? Is there a better career for you outside the company with one of our suppliers? So really thinking about how you can engage this current workforce is a big people issue on the top of mind. The final piece is around demographics. So this is really looking into the future, and as a number of our clients, I've got a client that's 300,000 people, big global bank. And you go into that client and say, what is it that each of your people do? Their systems can't tell them what their people do. Their systems can't tell them how many people really are touching a particular process in a finance function, et cetera. So really getting a hold of kind of the workforce data, even for smaller companies, and understanding what gets done where, especially in large, complex global organizations, is one challenge. And then as you start to put your arms around that data, you can actually start to say, well, I've got a demographic cliff in a certain geographic sector. What do I need to do around putting a pipeline of talent in place? I've got a lot of a young, if you go to somewhere like India, where there's a very, very young working population, the scariest thing that's happening in India right now for organizations is, where do you put those young people to work? We've seen what's happened in Greece and Spain, where you've got a lot of young people out of work, and what's happening now is the Greeks are learning German and going to Germany. So thinking about demographics kind of today, tomorrow, whether it's aging workforce, whether it's a number of women in key positions, whether it's hotspots of the world where you've got a large young population that's potentially out of work, and as a business leader, and there's a big role that government play here, both regionally, domestically, globally. Really thinking about that is one of the biggest concerns that our clients are starting to anticipate and plan for, but no one's really solved and addressed how you think about that globally.
Dan Rose?
Okay, good afternoon. I've been asked to be brief and provocative. So my goal is to wake you all up and get a rise out of you, and to save the extended discussion for the question and answer, because I can expand on any of the points I make briefly, because I'm on a different wavelength. My point of departure is aligned by Paul Valéry, the French poet who wrote after World War I. He could have been thinking of us when he coined the phrase, "The future is not what it used to be." We are heading into a dramatically different future, I believe, and all indications seem to point, and there will be, in all likelihood, nobody can predict with certainty, but the likelihood is there will be great discontinuities and great social and economic challenges to our whole ecosystem. You're going to be living in a different world. There are I can expand on these later, there are 4 clear indications or factors. 1 is automation. 2 is globalization. 3 is the exponential high-tech development. And number 4 is demographics. The first 3, automation, globalization, and exponential high-tech development, all are, quote, labor saving. Labor saving. Everybody is discussing that. You're going to have, with robotics, you're going to have imminently driverless trucks. Who's talking about what you're going to do with the guys who currently are truck drivers? You're speaking of 3, I was going to be brief and save these for later, but 3-dimensional printing means people are going to be able to sit at a desk, and you're dealing with a totally different world. So automation, which means anything that used to be done by unskilled or semi-skilled labor on an assembly line that was routine, can now be done by machines. Globalization means that our semi-literate young people, or that our workforce is going to be competing with the workforce throughout the world. And high tech means that not just gadgetry, but aspects that you can't conceive of that I can expand on later. And it's exponential, and it's coming imminently. Those three, all those three are, quote, labor saving. Number 4, demographics. What that boils down to, with an aging population, that means we're heading to a world in which there are going to be an increased number of beneficiaries of government programs and a diminishing number of workers who are taxpayers. And these are going to cause and all of this is going to be in a climate where our GNP, our GDP, is going to be growing at a rate significantly lower than it has grown in the past. And these are all problems that are challenges. And what frightens me is not only the challenge, but that virtually no one is discussing them. Later, I'm supposed to be brief so I can discuss my answers to the challenges. But in terms of the workforce, remember, a globalized workforce where throughout the world the people who can be studying on those high-tech scholastic activities are in competition with us. Now here you have the numbers of the California State University system is the largest academic complex, college complex in the world. Under 20% of their students graduate in 4 years. Under 20%. Under 50% graduate in 6 years. More than 1/2 of incoming students to the California system require remedial work in mathematics and in English. They can't read, they can't write, and they can't count. All right? U.S. debt, student debt, is now $1 trillion and growing. The cost of college education is growing. Students now owe $1 trillion. We've just passed the mark. In terms of our population generally, just another number, in 1970, 12% of our college graduates came from the bottom economic quartile. This year, it will be 7. So you are heading to a world. Incidentally, and one of the graduation rates at most U.S. colleges are roughly at the 55% level. If you put this all together, nobody knows the future. You can only guess. If you look at we used to grow for the last 2 or 3 decades at between 3 and 4%, over 3% per annum compounded. The best estimates of the Federal Reserve and all the others are we're going to be growing at 1 3/4 to 2 1/4, something in that order of magnitude. So you're going to have less of growth. You're going to have an aging population. You're going to have to ask yourself, this year, 1 million young people dropped out of high school in America. 1 million. What are you going to do with those million people who are semi-literate? You're not going to let them starve. You're not going to let them sleep. All right, so we are facing problems. The likelihood is that this economy that will grow at, let's say, on roughly 2% per annum, that's what the sharpest people are guessing. Those people, and that includes the people in this room, who are highly educated, highly skilled, innovative, creative, hard driving, they are going to do very well. The GNP is going to grow, and that fragment that are in there, first there in the morning and the last there at night, who are thinking and questioning, who are innovating, they are going to do very well. The bulk of the American public that used to be called middle class, and once again, Pat Moynihan, Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a good friend of mine, and he was a coiner of wonderful phrases. One of his phrases was defining deviancy down. If the crime rates are going badly and you're afraid of admitting it, you define it down. If birth rates, if unmarried births are skyrocketing, you either don't look or you adjust or whatever. What used to be called middle class meant a generation that assumed that its children's generation would be better educated than their generation. That's no longer true. Educational achievements are leveling out. It meant in the past that you could assume that a middle-class person, after a life of productive business activity or commercial or professional activity, could own his or her own home, could educate their children, and could look forward to a retirement where their savings could permit them a certain amount of comfort or peace of mind in their last years. That is no longer the case. And what we mean middle class, the aspirations and hopes of what middle class types used to have, is going to be a lot harder to achieve. What we are going to have in addition is a large pool of semi-literate, let us say, unskilled and semi-skilled labor who are going to find that the routine mechanical jobs in factories that were the way up are not going to be there. They're going to find also, in terms of globalization, they are going to be competing with billions of people who are going to be hardworking and highly motivated and are going to have access to education and you're finding huge percentages of our best universities are having foreign students coming in. So this is going to be a very real challenge. What do we do with all of those growing number of Americans for whom there is no economic growth? I'm trying to be brief, but the most sophisticated observers are aware of the fact that employment is not only an economic fact of life, it's a psychological fact of life. That going somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning and doing something that you think is significant and in which you can take some satisfaction or pride, and doing it until 5 o'clock and leaving and feeling you've earned it, is a different mindset than someone who gets the same paycheck for staying at home. And that's harmful if you're a poor, dysfunctional family getting a dole. It's equally destructive if you're the child of the ultra-rich who gets a paycheck for doing nothing. Where are the Nobel Prize winners from the ultra-rich? Where are the great creative? Too much, my father used to like the phrase, you can harm a plant by too much water as well as too little. And The question is, what is the right amount? So we are, I was told to get a rise out of you,
You've got it, you've
which
got
I'm
it.
trying to do. Our society has real challenges. The question is going to be, how are we going to deal with these things? How are we going to meet them? In the question and answer, I will give you my solutions.
Oh, dear.
But I think that in the real world, competition internationally means that our workforce has to be much more highly skilled, much better prepared, much better trained than the indications are that they're going to be. Our high-tech employers say they can't find young people, and our young people are going to schools where they get out and they are unprepared to deal in the productive world. So that I'm really saying, I believe
Will they take us
our
up after
future is going to present
They'll
us
take us up after
with
that.
very
I'll do it.
real
You want me to do it?
challenges that are not adequately discussed and we can discuss that later. So forgive me for having.
So we've got a lot of things thrown out there. We'll try to come back to them. We'll try to come back to them. One of the early things talked about that I think bears more conversation is the subject of character. And if we're talking about the challenges of leadership and developing people for the future, how do we develop character? What can we do? Is there some answer? Is it related to other things going on in society? Is there no answer? Is there any hope there?
Well, do you want to try?
Well,
Try first.
yeah, of course there is. I mean, it's happening all around us. We're in a room with young people who are being taught character every single day. So yeah, I'm not pessimistic at all. I mean, I appreciate the impassioned presentation that the world is going to hell.
No, the world has challenges.
Okay.
Well, it does have challenges. I was born in 1943.
A lot of challenges.
The war ended in the summer of 1945. If you look at the globe in 1945, relative to what it is today, it was far worse off then.
Yep.
Far worse. It's not even a close call. It was far worse off than it is today. And human beings managed to make it better.
Yep.
I mean, I graduated from college in the middle of the Cold War. And the dominant fear was we're going to blow ourselves up. We didn't. And today, most of the countries on earth are democracies, and they weren't you can travel, largely unrestricted, in ways that you couldn't do. Are there challenges? Yeah, there are challenges, but there's no shortage of evidence of young people with the character necessary to make the right decisions. And I happen to trust that they will make the right, not all of them. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do when I was in the service for a short period of time was go to what I consider to be the best educational experience I had. It began at Fort Benning, Georgia. It was Army Ranger School. And among the things you learn in Army Ranger School that I apply every single day of my life is, first of all, pay attention to detail. Secondly, you can't delegate responsibility. If it's on your watch, you got to do it, and you can't blame it on somebody else. You've got to persist. You've got to learn what it means to follow a bad leader. And you hear all the time people say, failure is not an option. I think it was Vince Lombardi. Well, I got news for you. Failure is an option. And it's going to happen. It's not a question of am I going to fail. The question is what do you do when you fail? And it's hard. And the older you get, the harder it gets. I mean, this aging process is a bitch. Life really, in a lot of ways, is a series of losses. You start off a baby, and then at the end of this whole thing, we all die.
Yeah.
And you lose your mom, you lose your dad, you lose your health, you're losing stuff. And the question isn't, am I going to lose something? The question is, what do I do after I lose? And if you give up, don't blame me. Look, the hardest thing about freedom is there always has and there always will be a correlation between results and effort. It's tough. It doesn't mean I can, if I really work hard, I can play for the New York Yankees. Although this year maybe I could have.
This year, there are too many on the bench.
It doesn't mean I can do anything I want to, but I can't really blame it on somebody else if I don't make the effort necessary to get the job done if it was within my reach. And I don't see any shortage of young people. Is it 100%? No. Never has been. But is it sufficient to be confident, to be optimistic? Absolutely.
Is there anything we do to further the development of character, though, more broadly? Nina?
Yeah, you know, I think we have to celebrate character. We have to celebrate learning. We have to celebrate education. If we want to get down to a particular type of education, mathematics, we have to make it exciting and, pardon the French, sexy. If we don't, as parents, as colleagues, as friends, as members of a community, as citizens of a country, celebrate the entire possibility of our people asset being the quality that propels us ahead, as it has been. We can talk about this across the world. Let's just deal with the U.S. right now. The innovation that's occurred here over many decades in many environments has propelled us to be an amazing place. There are many other amazing places over the world, and we should never develop such a hubris that we think we have the only way of looking at things, that there's only one way to do it. So I think first and foremost, celebration. Celebration of education, celebration of learning, celebration of character. When people stand up and are counted and take responsibility, we should celebrate it. I don't know whether you saw the news this morning. Lovely young man working in a Dairy Queen. Did you see this? Anybody see this? It's a Berkshire Hathaway company, by the way. And he was watching, was ready to serve up a comb. A person who had limited sight came in, dropped a $20 bill. He watched it happen. The woman behind the man picked it up and put it in her pocketbook. He thought she was going to return it because he picked it up so quickly. Instead, the woman walked out, and he walked up to her and said, "Aren't you going to give that back?" And she made a big commotion. He asked her to leave. Then he went, this is a kid making not very much money. He took $20 out of his own pocket and walked up to the person and said, "I'd like to give this to you." Now, he said, "Everybody's thanking me." He said, "I just did it because it was the right thing to do." Now, you know, when you hear stories like this and you see them and these are happening all over, is everybody like this? No. But celebration, I got a call from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's going to fly him on his company plane. Of course, he owns NetJet. Anyway, to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. But I mean, and I thought it was very stand up and be counted of this young man to simply say, "I was doing the right thing." So celebration of it. I think the one big thing about character and education, the next crucial thing is the ability to look at things in a different way, critical thinking. And one of the biggest issues and one of the most important thing of anyone's education and living is an education, is the ability to look at the same thing and see something different about it every day. Because the more you notice what's going on around you and about people, the more you're able to address really difficult problems and figure out solutions. I believe in the ability of the human mind to capture solution, but only if the human mind has exercised itself to be open to the way things look differently every day and to recognize the fact that other people see things very differently. May I give one other example of something? At one time I was sitting in a big business environment. It was a corporate activity on diversity. Okay, now I happen to be one of the diversity types, you know, gender, but diversity to me means the whole gamut. You're not in a diversity situation. It's not just gender related. It's not just ethnicity. It's all the perspectives that are important. This happened to be one thing on gender. I happened to have 7,000 people reporting to me at the time. Most of them were men. These were women, very large organization, brought in from all over the world, from 67 countries. Very different ethnicities in the room. We had outside people engaging the discussion. So they were all sent off to have discussions about several problems they were given and to come report back. I was also one of the leaders of the $9 billion corporation, the only woman. So I'm there, and they were dividing everybody up, and I said, "Well, where do I go?" And the facilitators turned around and said, "You better go with the men." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "You can't go with the other women because they all report to you. You can't go because you're an American, and a lot of the people outside of the country complain that Americans speak too much. We do. Remember from grade school? Oh, I know the answer. That's how we're trained. That's okay. That's us. But in other cultures, the ability to listen is just as valued, not yap all the time. So they were saying, we will be not following what they wanted to do if you don't. So I walked into the room of 4 other guys and I said, they told me to go with you, and they said, welcome to the locker room. So I thought we had really actually made a statement there. So the key thing here is to be able to look at things differently, recognize everybody doesn't look at the same thing at the same way, and to embrace it, to be excited about it. Any chance you get to be in an environment where you're the only one of something, take it, because it will open your eyes in an incredibly dramatic fashion. You will go into a room and all of a sudden you'll say, geez, and you sit down and talk to people and they just come at things differently. So I thought you did a great job about describing true issues, no doubt about it. But I have a great enthusiasm. Maybe it's because I also sit on a university board and I engage with a lot of young people. And Tuesday night, I sat in a presentation, not in a presentation, I watched robots driving disaster vehicles. And they're going to compete in a DARPA. These are the people, by the way, founded under the Eisenhower administration, DARPA. They'll compete on December 20th and 21st in Florida. Huge major companies, 1 or 2 universities, Drexel University is one of them. And these guys are so excited about this. These robots will drive into these situations and try to diagnose what's going on. So I get a thrill out of seeing people like all of the young military people we have here who are willing to devote themselves to principle and to making something happen in a very different environment. All the other fellows programs that we have here. I mean, I get real excited about this. I know we have problems, but I think if we can, shoulder the wheel, we can solve some things.
Maybe
Sorry,
just to add a quick
little
point.
enthusiastic about this.
A quick point on the business piece. Business leaders own this issue as well. There are many businesses, I don't care what industry or what geography you're in, a number of business leaders will hold their hands up and say, character's so important, ethics really important, we have the programs, etc. Once you get into these organizations and you look and you really see what's happening, character many times goes out the window. Whether it's, I'm going to incent you around financial results and it's not about kind of doing the right thing for your customer, whether it's the way you treat people, whether it's the fact that, we talk about we're an open, collaborative culture, but we're actually a real hierarchy. Yeah. And we're not honest about that. To be successful in a large corporation, sometimes it's about putting your head down, and it's about being networked to the right people. And some of that old school way of thinking still exists in some of the most largest, complex US, European, global organizations. So I think we really need to get business leaders at many levels to say, what does character mean to you? And are you really living it? And we need to call each other out around that. And we need to change the way we incent and reward character, because I think that there's an odds there. There's an
I think that's right. But I think we're seeing a shift. And the kind of enforcement issues that are coming up in big business and financial particularly, and notably yesterday, are very high-profile punishments in terms of riveting people on it's just not about money entirely. I would also say that a lot is happening for our high school students and at the college level. There's civic engagement is very much a part of the university experience at virtually every university now, and that concept of giving back. There's something changing in curriculum, which is the amount of collaboration that is part of the way classes are taught and the way these kids are interacting with each other. That is moving up exponentially. And grades are much more often now to a group, right? Your team does X. So I think that's changing. There's no doubt about it that you have a generation of young business leaders that are more entrepreneurial than ever. And I think they look at the businesses that their parents were in as somewhat unethical, right? We are a generation that went through extraordinary, to your point, downsizings because automation changed the sheer numbers that you did. I'm in the publishing business. And in the publishing business, a paper mill on the Penobscot River in Maine had 5,000 employees in 1970, and they probably have 50 right now, and they produce 4 times as much paper at a higher quality. And so computers are driving much more. Those changes have happened. But it means that the sons and daughters of those people see the world differently. They watch their parents buffeted by the changes in American industry. And the consequence of that is they're looking to go it alone. They're looking to find teams, to find entrepreneurial opportunities, and their heroes are Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Michael Dell. And those people are the people they want to emulate. They have ethical businesses. They have, you might want to argue that about, but I think by and large,
Yeah, I
ethical
would
business.
argue that too.
Okay. But
happening
they've gone into business with a very different vantage point. That the companies that are starting up now with 20-somethings are often ethnically oriented. They are parts of their communities. The people that work there are expected to reach out into those communities, and it's a somewhat anti-corporate view, I believe. While the multi-100,000 corporations exist and will exist, I feel that there's a flavor in the post-recession world and the post-downsizing world that's driving something different.
So talking further about technology, if not everybody is going to have the entrepreneurial.
Excuse me, you raised character. Are we still on the question of character?
If you want to make a comment.
I ask these young people, what are the role models? Where are the role models our young people have when today, this week, our Congress is seriously discussing the closing down of the government and getting ready to discuss next week or the week after putting the United States of America in default if they don't extend the debt level? What indication of character does that give? When we speak about these things, about the economy at large, here you have since 2009 to today, 95% of the increase in wealth and income has gone to the top 1%. 60% of it has gone to the top 1/10 of 1%. Now my father, who had to leave high school to help support his family, sent his 3 sons to Yale. That was what the American dream was. My father had to get out and work, never graduated from high school, and his 3 sons went to Yale. But my father loved the comment. He loved to comment on a fellow riding in a leaky rowboat who refused to help bail out the leaky rowboat because the leak was not under his seat. I am afraid that our national rowboat may be leaking, and a frighteningly high percentage of our people, our leaders, our people at the top of all levels of business and academia and government, are not worrying because the leak is not under their seat. That's my comment on character.
I don't think that's true.